I'm here to share with you her story. One I had not believed myself until it was too late. When she came to me, she was just a child. A child with what I thought were more nightmares. Some simple cry for her parents' attention. You don't have to believe what I'm about to tell you. God knows I don't. But what I've learned, I feel necessary to pass on to others. If nothing else, to tell the story of a simple young woman living in what can only be described as her own personal hell. Feel free to dismiss this as delusion, or whatever you will. But what I'm about to tell you is true. And the next time you find yourself looking into the eyes of your child, or your lover, or friend, simply be thankful that she still has them. He stood shaking in front of the window, staring out into the street below. He took another sip of his tea, the cup clinking and clattering back into the saucer as he put it back. A drop clung for life from his lower lip, and he carelessly wiped it away with the sleeve of his crisply starched dress shirt. Sweat poured from his brow, and tears were flooding his eyes one moment, and receding to reveal the redness the next. The bustling around them was only matched by the circus of rush hour on the streets below. Nurses and doctors, patients and family members, it all seemed a jumble of white noise and blaring irritants. It was, to say the least, unsettling, especially considering the circumstances. She was doing so well, he began, his deep voice trembling as he struggled to speak. She was getting better. You can't beat yourself up over this, Dane. It's not your fault, Dr. Anderson replied. He had known Dane Welsh and his family for nearly 20 years. His sister Frankie was here in the hospital undergoing surgery. She was found in her apartment after a distressed phone call to Dane. For years, she had suffered terrible delusions and hallucinations, as long as he could remember, in fact. It seemed that she had taken a piece of mirror glass to her eyes in some final attempt to bore out the images that she had always seen. Very sad, actually. Her therapy with him seemed to be going so well. She called me. She needed me, and I couldn't make enough time to help her. I just told her to calm down, that I'd be there after work. He began weeping at that point, burying his face in his hands, his back lurching with each sob. Why didn't I just go to her when she needed me? You couldn't have known, Dane. You can't do this to yourself. I'm sure she'll be fine. The surgeons here are top-notch, and they're doing the best they can for Frankie. You aren't at fault for this. Dr. Anderson was doing everything he could to comfort Dane, but even he could not know whether Frankie would pull through or not. Frankie had always been a very disturbed young woman, and at this point, she had obviously been broken. He wasn't even sure if her mind could be repaired now if she did indeed survive. I can't understand, Doc. She's gone through this since she was a kid. Nothing like this has ever happened because of it. The things that she says she sees, the things she says she hears, she's never gone this far. Dane paused for a moment, still staring out the window, still holding his tea with a shaking hand. I have a question, and I'm not sure there's a logical answer for it. His voice shook. What is it, Dane? Anderson said in his most understanding tone, but his underlying curiosity showed through well. How? He began, but it seemed almost as though he was afraid to finish. Like the answer would be more disturbing than the question itself. How did she remove the other eye? Spokane, Washington, 22 years earlier. She just sat and stared at him. Dark circles around her eyes displayed a cruel lack of sleep for a child of only 6. She looked tired, and she looked angry. Her expression was one of pure disdain. But was it for him? Her parents? That's what he was there for, to find out what it was that was preventing the child from being a normal, healthy, and happy 6-year-old. Her head was pointed slightly down. Her eyes were cold and furious, looking up at him as he sat in the chair in front of her. The dark circles made her look almost inhuman, close to evil. She held a teddy bear with a green bow around its neck in her left arm, and her hair was up in pigtails, streaming down on either side of her little oval face, so worn and tired. "Frankie, I'm Dr. Anderson. I'm here to talk with you about some problems that your parents have told you about. Do you want to talk with me?" She just stared at him, those little eyes listless and trying so desperately to stay open. "Your mommy tells me that you've been having some trouble staying awake at night. Can you tell me why?" She never moved, but finally spoke, her eyes never leaving his, the same troubling expression on her face. "They won't let me," she said in a scratchy tone. "Your parents won't let you?" Anderson asked. "No. Them," she said, as she lifted her hand lazily and pointed to somewhere behind him. When he turned, he saw nothing. Merely beige walls and a few children's finger paintings. Confused, he looked back to her. "What are you pointing at, Frankie?" "Them. The bad things. They keep me awake at night. They won't let me sleep. They scare me so I stay awake," she said. "What are bad things, Frankie? Are they monsters?" he said, intrigued by her story. "Yes. They're monsters, I think. They say things, they scare me, and they look scary. I told my mom and dad, and they didn't believe me," she said, clutching her bear now. "And you say they're here now?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, pointing again at the wall behind him. He could only think that she was having nightmares, and the fact that they kept her awake made her all the more terrified of them. She was hallucinating and seeing them now while she was awake, a delusional 6-year-old. Wasn't uncommon. But to this extent, it was unusual. "What do they look like, Frankie? Can you tell me?" She was silent for a moment, almost as though she was unsure of how to answer his question. "They look different all the time. Different ones," she replied quietly. This confused him even further. Normally, children put a single face on their nightmares or imaginary monsters. Very puzzling indeed. "So there's more than one. Where do they come from, Frankie?" "They come from everywhere. I see them everywhere. Can you make them go away, please?" She sounded frightened and desperate, but her voice was so soft and tired. "I'm sure gonna try, sweetheart. But I need you to talk more about the problems you're having. What's going on at home? Is there any trouble there?" "No, not really. Daddy goes to work in the morning, Mommy goes to work in the morning, and Dane walks me to school. He pushes me down a lot, though. He's a butt," she said, as she nuzzled her bear with her chin. Anderson laughed lightly and nodded his head. "Big brothers are like that sometimes. But he walks with you to school, so that's a good thing. Not a lot of brothers would do that for their little sisters." "I guess. Can you please make them go away now?" she said again, her voice higher now, a more sincere pitch to it. "Now? We have to work to get rid of them, sweetheart. And that takes time." "I mean them!" She pointed to the wall behind him again. "Make them go away!" She began shouting, her voice frantic and riddled with fear that was impressively more profound than it had been earlier. He looked again behind him and scanned the room, trying to see what it was that frightened her so, but he saw nothing. "It's okay, Frankie. I don't see anything. There's nothing bad there that can hurt you, sweetheart." He was trying hard to comfort the child, but she was unresponsive to his kind words. But then, without warning, she became very still, her eyes fixed on him, the black circles around them heavy and well pronounced amidst the unusual violet-colored eyes that now seemed to peer into his very being. "Just because you don't see them, Dr. Anderson, doesn't mean they aren't there,"